I just recently got back from a pretty amazing festival in the Peruvian Andes, and while the whole thing is still fresh in my mind, I thought it's a great opportunity to share some tips that can be useful for your travel and documentary photography. So keep watching.
Hey, I'm Mitchell. For the past decade, I've been living my dream, journeying around the world as a professional travel photographer. During this time, I've seen and I've learned a lot. And now I want to share the knowledge with you. Come along on the journey.
I was shooting at Qoyor'ritti, the Snow and Star Festival of Peru. And while there, I was reminded of a lot of things that are really crucial for the travel and documentary photographer. I even learned a few new things, which are more specific to photographing in challenging environments. Mountains, altitude, extreme weather changes, that sort of stuff. Overall though, this video is about tips that are widely applicable. It's all about photographing festivals, celebrations, basically gatherings of people for the purpose of culture and tradition. I'll be referring to some of my past experiences throughout the video too. Just to really reiterate the point that what I took away from this festival is relevant on a much broader scale. I am still on the road in Peru. Right now I'm in a hotel room. I have given up big time on finding places which are really quiet. So if you hear people working, roosters, children, trains, sorry, but that is the only way to get this done. I am going to do this first part of the video from the hotel and the rest from wherever and whenever I find an appropriate enough setting. And before I begin, a couple of time lapses I shot through my hotel room window. The gear, lenses. I did make a video about the best travel photography lens a while back, and everything that I said is very much applicable here, but festivals present you with so many opportunities you would be mad to only bring one lens. These are the lenses that I took with me. 15mm or the 30mm equivalent Panasonic Leica Lumix. This, as I said in the past, is my favorite travel documentary photography lens. I use it mostly for candid shots and it's always great for that. The 42.5 or 85mm equivalent f1.7, all about portraits, shallow depth of field, and being able to shoot in relatively low light. The 45-200 or the 90-400 equivalent. This isn't a fixed aperture zoom, which is a minus, it's f4 to f5.6, but at festivals, reach can be crucial. Often it's crowded and we can't physically get close to the subjects to get the framing that we want. Zooming in might be the only way. The 12-35mm. It's the all-around workhorse lens. Used it for a bit of everything. Even though it doesn't create a great shallow depth of field effect, it's almost indispensable at a festival or in a situation where so much is changing so fast. Now, not all of these lenses that I've just mentioned are my best lenses, but I knew that I'd have the gear on me a lot of the time, so my choices were based on a very simple philosophy. Best value per gram, ounce, or whatever weight measurement you want to use. So this amazing 85mm equivalent, my best portrait lens, stayed in the hotel, as did this 70-200 equivalent with a fixed aperture of f2.8. This 12 or the 24mm equivalent stayed in the hotel too. These are great lenses, but they are relatively heavy. So if I think mountains, steep climbs, altitude, they're just not value per gram. Now, if you look at all of these lenses that I did bring with me, I have incredible reach and versatility, and they weigh about as much as a 70-200 lens on a DSLR camera. Camera bodies. The Panasonic Lumix GX80. I don't have the GX9 yet, so this is my current favorite camera. I usually have it with this lens for all the candid stuff. This is the Lumix G9, a relatively new camera. I wanted to play around with it. Awesome stills camera. This is the Sony a6500. Regardless of how much I love the Micro Four Thirds system, of how good it is, it's not going to be as good in the dark as the larger sensor cameras such as this one. So that's why I have my a6500 with the 50mm equivalent lens on it and this 75mm equivalent lens, both f1.8. Also used this camera for the videos you see from the festival. Then I have my Mavic Pro drone. I guess it can be considered a camera too. I didn't use it a whole lot, but it is nice to have some aerial footage and stills from this amazing event. These are my memory cards. I wanted to make sure that I would not run out of memory over the 3.5 days or so that I was shooting. These were more than enough. I did stop shooting 4K video just in case to save space, but looking back on it, I really didn't have to do that. This is what my power situation looked like. If you are going to remote places with no power supply, power banks are great. I've actually linked to all of the gear that I've been talking about, including the power banks which are similar to what I've been using, or they're actually even better, and that's all in the description below. Acclimatizing. The way that I look at it, acclimatizing is not only for high altitude. It can be important in any environment which is not your usual environment. The idea is to be comfortable in that particular climate. You don't want to be overwhelmed by the heat, by the cold, or in this case, by the cold and the altitude together. So it's always advisable to spend at least a couple to a few days just getting used to the climate in which you'll be working. Even more so when it comes to high altitude. All the info is available about all the climates out there. Google is your friend. A real quick interjection. This video is all about going behind the scenes and learning from real life examples. That's the best way to learn. If you're interested in learning about travel photography in even more detail and depth, check out my course. It focuses on photographing people. Everything from the process in the field to working with the images in Adobe Lightroom. You even get the raw files. You learn by going behind the scenes of my award-winning photos. The course is like a blueprint to making award-worthy photographs. I have actually got to go back to Lima, the capital, to catch my flight to Europe. And it's a very long drive. I'm gonna do it over a few days with a few stopovers. And during those stopovers, I hope to continue this video. All right, so I just couldn't resist doing a little detour to get closer to these beautiful mountain peaks and just to stop and admire them for a little bit. So the first tip I want to share from shooting at the Qoyor'ritti festival is come early and plan well. And this, of course, can apply to shooting at absolutely any festival or celebration. In my case, I wish that I didn't do most of the hike to the main site once the sun set. The pilgrims arriving were a big part of the event. I captured some of that, but later it just got too dark. I could have done with many more images. So just a bit of a waste to invest all that energy and not to fully take advantage photographically of the actual journey. I thought that I would come back to get those images later, but once I was amidst the action, there was just too much other stuff happening and I couldn't be everywhere physically. So yeah, plan your journey in a way that you can fully take advantage of it photographically. The way there, the way back. I remember a situation in the Himalayas. Daylight, villagers ascending for a full moon celebration. Later, coming down. I got there early, I stuck around, and I got all of the images of the journey there and back. They ended up being some of my favorite shots from that day. The next thing I want to touch on real quick is on how to behave. When we are talking about religion, sacred ceremonies, rituals, things can obviously get quite sensitive. However, what I have found is that if there are very few foreigners or outside visitors, people generally don't care too much. They're quite tolerant because no one really bothers them. At Qoyor'ritti, during Christmas in Lalibela, Ethiopia, in most festivals or celebrations I shot, the locals or the participants far outnumbered the foreigners. And in my experience as a whole, these sorts of occasions are actually some of the easiest to photograph. People are happy, they're open, sometimes they're even dressed in their best clothes, so it makes total sense for them to be photographed during these special occasions. So it's pretty much common sense, just don't go crazy, do a bit of research, see if there's something extra sensitive, something that you should avoid. But generally, if you do cross the line, you will be told, and if you act respectfully, you're not going to greatly offend anybody. Early start today. Gone is my beautiful mountain view. Instead, I have this sight, so you can't have it all the time. Will be quite a long drive today. I'd like to make it to Cotahuasi Canyon. A new friend told me it's really beautiful, not that the other places haven't been beautiful, but yeah, I'll make a few stops on the way. I hope to continue with the video here, and if the canyon really is very beautiful, well, it'll be the perfect place to finish this video. Well, I'd say that this place is as good as any for a quick stopover. Just down by a river, I saw a road coming down, I followed it, and here I am. Creating a more complete picture. A festival or a celebration is not only about the main event, whatever that main event may be. At Qoyor'ritti, much of the action was happening around the churches. There was a lot of dancing, large crowds. Then there was the bringing of the cross down from the glacier. I definitely think that all the main stuff is worth getting. But if that was all that I shot, the overall body of work would have lacked impact. It would have been fairly one-dimensional. At large gatherings of people, there are many other narratives, so many photo opportunities, and that's what I want to talk about next. I want to suggest some things that you should look for the next time that you are shooting in a similar situation. What to look for? One of the main things I wanted to capture, besides the main event, were portraits. There were many amazing faces at the festival. So I made it my goal to get some portraits of the pilgrims and of the groups of people who came to dance. This idea about portraits is applicable to virtually any festival or special event in the world. Such images might not show what was happening, but they are a strong representation of the event through the people. In line with portraits, I wanted to get close-ups of people doing their thing, enjoying the festival in their own ways, or just having a quiet moment. What else to shoot? Well, I like to explore and to visually survey the area for things that are potentially interesting. And this will be different from festival to festival, celebration to celebration. At Qoyor'ritti, there were vendors, there were pilgrims carrying all sorts of heavy weight up that tough mountain path. There were people cooking, lighting candles. Some examples that stand out from other festivals. In Mauritania, there was an animal market parallel to the cultural festival I came to shoot. Not the main attraction, but fascinating in its own right. During Christmas in Lalibela, Ethiopia, almost everything was visually interesting. People praying, people walking through their amazing rock churches. If you looked closer, you could see detail like this. The wrinkled, calloused feet of a pilgrim who came from possibly hundreds of kilometers away, all in the name of faith. Theyyam in South India is all about the performances. But if you come before and look around, you witness the things that lead to those performances, the preparations, the interaction between artists, expressions of people, their reactions. These are always interesting. Moments, simple human things. All of these help add to a more complete picture of a festival or a celebration. All right, so I better continue. I still have quite a way to go. Let's see what the road is like ahead. You may have noticed that there isn't any of the usual drone footage in this video. That is because in the last segment, I drowned it in the mountain river. Everything that I shot was on that memory card, and I actually tried to retrieve it, but as I was midway through the river, I realized just how cold it was and that the current was pretty decent. And then I said to myself, well, you might have lost the drone, but at least you haven't drowned. So let's not make this an even worse day. So yeah, sad, true story, but the show must go on. I just drove over a 4,000 meter mountain pass. This is another beautiful spot to stop and to talk about the next topic. And the next topic is communicating how it felt. This is one of the main creative challenges that I like to set for myself. So how do you communicate how something felt? Well, light and the way that it affects colors, the way that it interacts with certain elements within the frame has a lot to do with it. I actually made an entire video on light before. I'm going to link to it at the end of this video, and it's going to be in the description as well. There will also be links to other videos which are relevant to this one. I don't want to repeat too much what I said before, so here are some specific examples of how I used light to communicate what it felt like at the festival. During the blue hour, dawn, dusk, the cool palette was great for communicating how cool the temperature actually was, especially when you combine that with what the people were wearing.
And with scenes like these, where you can see the snow on a mountain, or steam coming out of this man's mouth.
There wasn't a chance to shoot right at sunrise or sunset, since much of the area was in the shadow of the mountain during that time. But there was the time right after, when the sun was a little higher.
The colors weren't quite as warm, but still warm enough and vivid enough to communicate a certain energy and a positive kind of vibe. In my case, and I'm sure in the cases of many others, there was a great sense of happiness that the sun came to warm us. The artificial light was, to me, great for communicating the relentless energy of the festival. It really represented that even when the sun went down, the action, the buzz continued. And then the candles. Fire and candles always give off a warm, cozy feel. At the festival, I always gravitated towards the fire once the sun went down. Partly because it was warmer around there, and it did feel much cozier next to the fire than in the -10 degrees Celsius weather. So warmth, life energy, that's what the fire communicated.
The most special lighting scenario came towards the end of the festival. The very cool palette of the blue hour
combined with that warm and cozy feel of fire and candles. I even caught a bit of the full moon, which I always see as a cold life energy. So
the expectation, the wait for sunrise.
Much of the scene still in the dark. The whole thing felt mysterious, magical. Once those snow-peaked mountains appeared, it was beautiful in an almost overwhelming, surreal way. The light and its effect had a lot to do with the visual impact of it all.
So I was lucky that there was a whole range of different types of light.
While the colourful devotees certainly made up for a lot, the overall body of work would have felt relatively boring and mundane if I shot everything only in shadow and overcast light.
In a sense, that's how the whole festival would have felt if it was just grey all day. I'm always looking to use light to communicate the feel, the mood, the atmosphere of places, of being there. So here are some other examples from past festivals, celebrations, and gatherings that I shot. Again, Lalibela was great for a whole range of scenarios. From dramatic, mystical, to something similar to Qoyor'ritti with the candles, to then just those sorts of wow moments. There, the fire really helped me communicate the raw energy of the ritual. Varanasi, not really a festival, but an all-year-round gathering of people. Here, as you can see, I really looked to capture light's interaction with thick fog. It helped me make evocative images, filled with atmosphere, mood, sometimes just ethereal scenes. Then Qoyor'ritti in Spain. It was all about light, fireworks, so again, just pure raw energy. I didn't make it to my destination as planned. The road turned out to be one of the most beautiful I've driven. Amazing scenery, llamas, mountains. The golden light made everything look even more beautiful. I was hypnotized by the road, and suddenly I was amidst those dramatic-looking snow peaks that I saw from afar just moments ago. The further I drove, the harsher, the more inhospitable the landscape looked. I thought to myself, it would not be good to get stuck here. The road kept taking me higher. I was approaching 5,000 meters. Not ideal for camping, and it was getting dark. Before I knew it, I was over 5,000 meters, in complete darkness. It started to snow pretty hard. Oh, and I was running out of fuel too. I was desperate to make it to a village to refuel. Soon the road was covered by snow. Here the road is still visible, but later in parts I only knew where it was thanks to the GPS. I didn't film because at this stage I was getting concerned for my safety. I mean, I'd never even driven on snow. I really didn't expect this.
Oh man, this day is really not going to plan.
Luckily, I was pretty much at the highest point there, so I could just put the current to neutral and roll down from there to save fuel. Though rolling on snow, I'm glad I have tires with a good grip.
As I descended, nothing but darkness, the narrow road, and occasional animals. No one in the streets in the small villages that I passed. Finally, I used my Maps app to find a place that seemed like it'd be big enough to have fuel.
Somehow I managed to make it there, set up camp. Next morning I got my fuel, and it actually turned out to be a wonderful traditional little village.
So I even got a few photos.
Yeah, so yesterday was not my day. On top of all that, I got these insect bites that just keep itching, but it's all part of the adventure, and I suppose makes for a good little story.
I have made it to Qoyor'ritti, finally. The whole region is beautiful.
I'm gonna process all that's happened, gonna chill in the hotel and in this village for the day, and get back to the tips tomorrow.
So here I am, kind of as much as I can be inside the canyon. It is spectacular. I wish I still had my drone, but what can you do? I'm gonna keep going a little further and I'll get back to the tips there.
Establish your plan or routine.
This applies more to festivals, celebrations and gatherings which go for a few days, where certain things are repeated. So the first day you explore, you look for things that interest you, and very importantly, you study how the light affects different areas of where your festival is taking place. Also, ask around, find out about what's happening and where. You need a plan or a routine to make the most of your time. If you just wander around, you may arrive too late in one place, too early in another place. You'll almost have a photo here and there, but it's likely that you'll be more frustrated than satisfied with your efforts.
This is what my plan/routine looked like for the Qoyor'ritti festival. All day. Almost at any time, I could photograph pilgrims and groups of dancers arriving and moving around. There was activity pretty much 24/7, and it was everywhere. It was something I could always fall back on. And all those faces, the characters, the costumes. To me, that's a big part of what the festival was about. Mornings. When the sun would come up, I'd want to go to an elevated area which received the first light. Coincidentally, that's where one of the chapels was. All the dancers would come there to wait and, of course, to dance. There was always a gathering of pilgrims too. I'd spend quite a bit of time in this area to take advantage of the beautifying light and of all the buzz around there. This would be from around 7:30 a.m. for a couple of hours. Sometimes I'd stick around the area even longer. The part around the chapel was a given, but if something else was happening, like this mass that I came across further up from the chapel, or people coming down after a mass, I'd photograph those things too.
Closer to midday, I'd eat, look for anything relatively interesting on the way to my tent, and I'd have my rest. It was difficult to sleep during the night because of the cold, so I wanted to make sure that I got my rest throughout the day. Important to be able to function and to be effective. You cannot underestimate rest.
Afternoon. Just before 4 p.m., much of the valley would fall into the shadow of the mountains. You already see some of that shadow in this drone footage. It would completely swallow up everything less than an hour later. If I wanted to catch the last sun rays, I'd have to go further up again, and that's actually where this footage is taken, a little further up above the valley. So I did very consciously plan when to fly the drone too. After dark. After the sun would set, there were certain places where people would light candles. I knew to expect this, so I looked for those gatherings and went directly to them to get some images.
It is important to ask around about what's happening if it's not clear. On the last morning, crowds of people were going up to the glacier. That's where I mentioned one of the more magical scenes and lighting scenarios happened. I wouldn't have known had I not asked around. I did, and planned my whole day around that. Adequate rest, early start, things like that. So anytime that the festival, celebration or gathering takes place over a few days, anytime there is repetition in what's happening, a plan, a routine will help you make the most of your time. And of course that in turn will increase your chances of getting those strong images. And now a few cases of how a plan or a routine helped me on other occasions. In Lalibela, Ethiopia, it was very important to plan. Something was happening everywhere all the time, but there were better times to shoot certain things in certain places. These photos are from a tunnel between churches. I knew that late in the mornings, the light would illuminate the pilgrims closer to the entry, and the rest would fade into darkness. I wanted this mysterious kind of image, so over a few days, I made a routine to come here, until I knew I had something. Varanasi was all about those magical, foggy mornings. I actually stayed there for 20 days, so I'd change my routine up a little. For a few days, I'd pick one spot where things were happening in the mornings, when the fog was at its strongest. Then for the next few days, I'd change to a different spot. In Mauritania, during the desert festival, I planned to spend mornings in the village of Walata. The interplay of shadow and light is always great at sunrise, and those mud houses looked a beautiful deep orange around this time. It was a really great setting for people coming past. Come up with ideas and stick to them. While exploring, establishing your plan, routine, you should also be coming up with photographic ideas with certain types of images that you want to make. Two cases from the festival that I want to share with you. The first, I think, didn't work out too well, and I want to explain why. I wanted to get some slower shutter speed images to capture motion blur and to show all the commotion, the movement of the pilgrims. This vendor was pretty still. The stillness was great for juxtaposition, but a few times he moved. Other times moving pilgrims were not where I wanted them compositionally. I got a few okay shots, but I don't feel that I stuck with the idea for long enough to get what I really wanted. And another one with slower shutter speed and motion blur. I wanted to communicate the movement of the dancers through the blur. I made quite a few exposures, different levels of blur, and I think I got at least a couple of images that I am happy with. The thing is, you never know when that great image will come. It may be one of the first ones, but more likely it's not going to be that. And you will never know, you'll never capture that great image if you don't stick with your idea for long enough. Make sure you got it. This is something that I do, and I suggest that other people do it too. If you have a laptop with you, review your images daily to make sure you got what you were after. If you don't have a laptop, or you don't have the time or the energy, review the images in your camera. Now wait, don't kill me in the comments. I'm not talking about chimping and reviewing the camera screen after every single shot. I'm not even talking about reviewing it after every sequence, but you will have downtime. So while you're having a tea, while you're waiting for your lunch, review your images. At least at the festival, if you realize that you don't have what you are after, there's still a possibility of getting those images. Choosing your images. I ended up with thousands of images from the festival. I haven't even finished sorting through all of them yet. To do this, I like to use an app called Photo Mechanic. Before I even copy the images onto my hard drives, I look through them and assign them colors. On the first sort, red means that it's a keeper. All worthwhile images are marked red and copied onto the hard drive. I discard all the ones with no colors. I'll later mark specific images that I think are particularly strong, but I won't delete anymore. The advantage of Photo Mechanic is that it's super fast. The images load instantly. You don't have to import anything and wait for hours. When you have hundreds or thousands of images to go through, you really appreciate that speed. I won't go into the post-processing that I did, since that is a whole big topic of its own, but at the end of the day, you want to have about 25-50 images that are very solid. I'll upload these images to a gallery in Photo Shelter, and these are the photos that I'll later send to editors. I'll also assign them keywords so that they can be found in Google searches. I have had people license my images this way quite a few times. So this has ended up being a pretty long video, pretty different from the others, but I hope that you have enjoyed it, that you have found it useful. Tell me what you think in the comments, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, more videos are in the works.